So glad you're with us tonight. Welcome, you early arrivers, you on-time crew, you who get the best pews in the congregation, I'm guessing on Sunday mornings, because there you are, choosing the one you want. Welcome, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We've got a few more people coming in, so we'll just give a minute maybe for that, and then we'll get things underway. Oh, it is good to be with people in this time. It is good to see friendly faces. It is good to see people who are doing good work in our congregations right about now. So it is really a gift to have you here tonight. Welcome. Welcome to the Mid-America Congregational Board Members Monthly Gathering. Your Mid-America staff and our tech host, Chanel Gomez, all of us are excited to be with you this evening. And we'll introduce ourselves throughout the night, but first I just wanted to let you know that you're in the right place and tell you what you can expect in the next 90 minutes that we're together. We'll start out by getting settled in and grounded for our time together. And then we'll spend a bit of time in breakout groups, checking in with one another before we dive into our learning portion of the evening. And then after we have the didactic piece of the night, we'll go back into those breakout groups divided by congregational size to talk about what we learned and answer some questions about what's happening in our congregations and cross-pollinate ideas and strategies and ways that we have found work in our congregations and ask questions about things that we would like some input on. And then we'll close with time back in the whole group at the very end. So again, if you're joining us, welcome to this Mid-America Region program, a monthly gathering and training for the congregational board members serving our congregations in the Mid-America region. My name is Lauren Wyeth. My pronouns are she or they. I serve as one of your congregational life consultants. I work with our large congregations, and I'm also the faith development specialist for our region. I am a white person in my late 50s with blondish brown curlyish shoulder length hair. I'm wearing tortoiseshell glasses and little miniature teacup earrings. I have on a gray sweater tonight, and behind me over one shoulder is a bookcase with a chalice atop it, and over the other shoulder is a bulletin board with a watercolor heart that says in the center of it, "You are here." And I'm coming to you from my attic office in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Tonight's gathering is an opportunity for us all to practice being in relationship with one another the way that we wish the world was in relationship with one another, right? So we're practicing some of the key leadership skills that are essential for these times when we show up for one another well. We ask that you lean into those skills in your interactions with others this evening, and we suggest the following group norms, which you'll also find pasted in the chat. We suggest that you do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself and that you extend grace as others do the same for themselves. We invite you to share by choice and remind you that it's always okay to pass or to pause. We are intentional about sharing the time with one another, moving forward more if that's something that we need to make the intention of doing, and moving back a little bit to make room for others if that's something that is the stretch for us. We ask that you speak from your own experience. We will for sure hear multiple perspectives this evening and every time we gather with other Unitarian Universalists. That is the beauty of pluralism. That is the reality of being human with all the different contexts we come from. We'll pause for repair as needed, and we'll make room for joy, for laughter, for curiosity, growth, sadness, and silence as they come. And lastly, we honor confidentiality, particularly with what is shared in those breakout groups. And then a few administrative notes. We will be recording the portions of the program when we're together in this large group tonight. So if you don't want to be in that recording, you can simply turn off your camera. And as I said earlier, in case you've joined us since then, we're going to be going into breakout groups a couple of times tonight based on congregational size. So if you haven't done so already, please follow the link in the chat for instructions on how to determine and indicate which group you belong in. And just a quick note for those of you from program size congregations, your primary contact, the Reverend Sharon Dittmar, is out this week on vacation. And so we'll combine your size congregations and the large size congregational board members in one breakout group with me this evening. And now I have the great pleasure of passing it over to our newest colleague on the Mid-America team, Nico Van Ostrand, who is our newly minted Congregational Life resident. Nico.
Thanks, Lauren. Hello, everyone. My name is Nico Van Ostrand. My pronouns are he or they. I am, as Lauren said, the new Congregational Life resident, about 1 month into that role, and excited to be here with you all tonight. I am a biracial Filipino person in my early 30s. I have short, dark hair. I have a silver septum ring, a silver earring, and a green college shirt on today. And I'm joining you from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And our other Mid-America staff will introduce themselves throughout the program, but I want to lift up and thank Chanel Gomez from the events team for serving as our tech host tonight. You will see Chanel in the chat and can message her for tech support at any time. I invite you now to take a moment to settle into this space with our chalice lighting reading. If you have a chalice nearby, feel free to grab it now and light it with me. These are our chalice lighting words by Krista Flanagan. What if everything always went according to plan? At first, we might accomplish more of what we think we need to accomplish. And it may seem less stressful at first, being able to anticipate what happens next. But after a certain amount of time, and that amount would vary person to person, the once comfortable predictability would become less comfortable and, well, boring. If we always know what happens next, we lose the joy of surprise, serendipitous experiences, and the excitement that comes from anticipating the unknown. Friends, let us gather with open, curious hearts, ready to explore the unpredictable, learn from its wisdom, and embrace its beauty. The chalice is now lit. I turn it over to Kiana Dene.
Hey y'all, hey, it's Kiana Dene. Um, I'm a double namer like Marianne or Linda Susan. I am physically in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the home of the Wolverines, who I hear they play a really mean game of basketball. Sorry, wrong season. And I do know my sports ball, y'all. I'm an African American woman with larger glasses on, a purplish headband, black locks that are coming over my shoulders, I should slow down, a blue hoodie, and a necklace that has a moose on it. Um, and I'm glad to be here with you all tonight. My pronouns are she and her. And again, I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We will soon be heading into breakout rooms. I have to put this on the wrong screen. Sorry, y'all. We are soon to be heading into breakout rooms, but first, please take a moment to reflect and let us know about trends and themes you're noticing in your congregation using the form you'll find linked in the chat. We invite you to engage in this practice time with each other. Your responses help your primary contact respond to your needs and inform your Mid-America team of trends and themes in our region as they emerge and evolve. Chanel's going to put those in the chat. So for a few minutes, um, yes, that'll be in the chat for you. All right, friends. Now we'll head into our breakout groups for about 10 to 12 minutes, and we'll return here at 10 till the hour. In your breakout group, you'll be invited to introduce yourselves and share a bit of the themes and trends in your congregation. Chanel is pasting the prompt you will use. Be sure to share the time and enjoy one another.
So welcome back, everyone. My name is the Reverend David Pyle. I am the regional lead for the Mid-America region of our Unitarian Universalist Association, and I am also the governance specialist for the Mid-America region, which is why I have been privileged to be the one presenting for our board members gathering this year. This workshop is one of the ones that I actually get asked to present on more often than anything else. And that is the particular areas of how congregations can do strategic planning, can do in an ongoing, continuous way. Last month, we engaged the board's responsibilities for planning for the congregation's future. This is less a theoretical conversation or a conversation about why that's a board responsibility, and more a presentation on a particular way that congregational boards can do an ongoing process for planning for the future. And I want to say that this can seem a little complicated until you get the hang of it. And so one of the things that we've agreed is that we're actually going to, unlike the other workshops, we're actually going to send this slide deck out after tomorrow. Chanel will send that out to everyone who is registered for the workshop. And the slide deck is built to be able that you could take it and share it with your board or with a planning team. And I also will make another offer at the end of our time together. But let me jump right in. So a little more about these workshops, this board members gathering about this series. Each month we come together to explore a different topic in board leadership. And this month's focus is not congregational assessment, it is the 3-year strategic planning process. Each month we'll have a short time of presentation with followed by group discussion based on congregational size. And most of the materials for board leadership can be found in the board basics course and also the board foundations course on the UUA Leader Lab. And so a little refresher from what we discussed last month. Basically the speed, we had some styles of doing planning for congregations before, particularly before COVID, that were really based in doing large form assessment of the congregation and pulling from the congregation, deep hopes and desires to be able to produce static planning for the congregation. But the speed of congregational life is so much faster than it was even when I came into the ministry, almost 2 decades ago. It's certainly faster since COVID. And what we found over and over was that those more static, long form, big effort planning processes would really only last in effectiveness for the first couple of years because situations would have happened that changed the circumstances around which that initial planning had been done by the congregation, usually in a big process. And that future planning for congregations needed to be based in a deep understanding of the congregation's mission, and that needed to be ongoing, needed to be dynamic and able to shift and change even within a particular year. That the governing board, as we know from some of our earlier sessions, it's often the governing board and the staff that have the deepest understanding of the congregation's mission and have done the work of doing assessment around how well the congregation is fulfilling that mission that leads into being able to do good planning for the future of the congregation. And my assessment is that static planning processes no longer meet the needs of congregations or the pace of congregational change. So let's take a moment and compare the difference between what I mean by a static planning process or a 3-year rolling or dynamic planning process. In a 3-year rolling strategic planning process, that plan is reviewed multiple times and updated multiple times throughout a board year. When it's being done by the board, it's built into the work of the board as a core aspect of the board's work to return to that plan and update it and change it at least once per year, if not multiple times during the year. Sometimes it may also be delegated to a subcommittee of the board or a task force that is focused on managing the congregation's strategic planning, having been charged with that by the board. But the key is that it remains adaptable and to the changing circumstances of the congregation, and to a changing understanding of the congregation's mission. And that annually, the board makes a full effort to review and update the whole of the strategic plan. For years, the UUA recommended 5-year strategic plans. I remember when I was a district executive, I could tell when a congregation had applied for a chalice letter grant because that was the last time they had done their 5-year strategic plan because it was a requirement to apply for a chalice letter grant. So the and what really struck me was that those static 5-year plans where it was a big effort, task force was put together, lots of congregational leaders came together. You had big listening sessions with the congregation to ask them to gain their input. And then it produced a 5-year plan that the primary effect of which was 3 to 5 years later, somebody found it on a former president's computer and felt guilty about all the things the congregation had committed to that weren't actually what happened because over time circumstances changed. And that plan that made sense 5 years ago didn't make sense now. And so out of that realization is when I and a few other people developed what we call the 3-year rolling strategic planning process. Now, I'm going to tell you this is not a thing we created out of whole cloth. This comes out of some business planning models. I will tell you that I learned it through being a chaplain in the United States Army and being a graduate of military schools because but this idea that you to develop a strategic planning process that is the ongoing work of leaders, whether it's the board or delegated to another group, um, that is dynamically changing throughout the life of the congregation. So I'd love to ask you all in the chat, if your congregation first has any form of strategic plan that you are working with, and if so, is it a more dynamic one or is it a more static one, as we described? If you could respond to that in the chat we'll give it a minute and see what the ecosystem and landscape looks like. Yes, Margaret says yes on having a strategic plan, a static strategic plan. Thank you, Margaret. Yes, static strategic plan from Anne. Fort Wayne says they have a 5-year static plan. Yep. And it is the most common that congregations do. Um, we've got a good number of congregations in the Mid-America region, about 7 or 8, that are currently doing more dynamic rolling plans. But it is the most common to see 5-year plans in congregations. No, beginning now, having done a congregational survey, says Ken. And Eric says, the strategic direction initiative we have begun is focused more on the direction versus static strategic goals. Yep. And Anne says ours is 1 year, which is basically a dynamic plan. It's just one you're redoing every year. So thank you all. Dynamic plan is being evolved, says Linda. Great. So thank you all for that feedback and letting us center. So I'm going to describe to you the basic conception of a 3-year rolling strategic plan. And I'll add in some about how a board manages it. But realize that it's a little complex. When I do, this is a short form 30-minute workshop. When I do, and this is the offer, when a congregation is really going to try and make the commitment to shift from static planning to more dynamic rolling planning, one of the things we offer is to do a deep training. Usually it takes about 3 to 4 hours online or in person for the team that is going to be managing that process. And if your congregation does want to make that shift, that is a thing that I or your primary contact would be able to do. We love to do things with multiple congregations together. So be in touch with us if you really are going to try and make the shift from static planning to more dynamic or rolling plan. So when you have in a rolling 3-year rolling strategic plan, you have your first year, the year that you're coming into. Let's say we are in June of 2026. So coming into that, if the plan just magically existed, we would have is that the fiscal year if your fiscal year is July to June, your fiscal year for 2027 is already 100% ready to go. It's got implementation plans. It's got clear goals and outlines of what you're going to do in the next year. You are ready to implement that. That 1 year is ready to go. The next year out, what would be fiscal year 2028, that is about 60 to 75%. It may have some big follow-on goals, maybe a couple of new goals that you've set for that year that would be in your capacity for that year. But it's probably light on the implementation planning around who's going to be responsible for it or where the money is going to come from or how much staff time is going to be restructured to be able to make that. It's a little more than just having the goal. You've got some beginning planning for but it's not 100% ready to go just yet, right? And maybe there's also some blank space in it for you don't have all of the potential goals. You've given some space for something new to come up in the next in during the next year. And then year three, your fiscal year 2029 would be about 20, it's just a skeleton, about 25% ready to be implemented. It's just some broad goals, probably no implementation planning built into that yet. So the basic premise is when you're coming into your strategic plan, you have 1 year that is absolutely ready to go, ready to be implemented. You have next one where you've got the goals laid out, but you haven't yet figured out all the steps or who's responsible for implementing yet. That's a little fuzzier. And maybe there's a little room left. And then you've got the third year out that is 25% basically just a list of some priorities and goals that you want to move, that you're planning to move into next. So we come into July of 2026 or 2027, FY 2027. And during that year, your board and lay leadership is implementing. They're working to implement that year one of the plan as an accountable roadmap for the congregation's work. So as the staff is planning their work, they have that fully implementable plan ready to be the guide for that work. The board is also looking at what resources and support the congregation might need to be able to implement year two, right? And to start putting during the year, as the staff and the team and the board are implementing year one, you're also getting year two move from that 60 to 70% to the 100%. You're doing the work during the year to say, okay, this goal that is continuing, who's going to be responsible for it? How do we get the staff time to be able to focus on that? Who are the volunteers who we're going to recruit to help us with that year two? You're turning that year two into a fully implementable year one. Does that make sense, everyone? And then you're taking that year three and you are adding a little more to it through the year. You're saying it's going from just being a set of goals to becoming a little bit more, adding in, okay, these are how these goals may adapt. Maybe some of them don't make sense anymore during the year. But so basically in each iteration, you are refining the plan. You have 1 year that is ready to implement at the beginning of July if your fiscal year is July to June. You have 1 year that is some goals with some implementation planning, 60 to 70% ready to implement. And then 1 year that is 25% a list of goals, maybe a few priorities. And what happens over the year is that window shifts. So when you come to the end of that fiscal year, the staff conduct a formal assessment of how well that former year one went. How well did we do achieving the goals that we set? The board then probably takes some of the things that don't get completed and moves it into the previous year two, right? Remember I told you there'd be some blank space in that year two because some things don't get done right. That, circumstances overwhelm, those things shift over. Maybe there are some things you started in year one that you, through your assessment, learned actually that's not important anymore, or that's not happening the way we thought it would happen, or something else overtook it. And so you might not continue it in year two like you had initially planned. But your goal, you're probably in May or June if you're in that July to June fiscal year. Your goal is to start making that assess the year one, see how well it went, and turn that year two into a now fully implementable year one. And it becomes your new year one starting in the next fiscal year, in fiscal year 2027, that would be. You then take what was that 25% that was the list of priorities and adapt it based upon what you learned in the assessment of the year you just completed and start adding some implementation planning, right? Who's going to be responsible for it? Where are we getting the money to be able to do this? Who are the volunteers we're recruiting to be part of this effort for each of these goals? And then you add another set of list of goals for that new year three, which would be FY30 in this example. So this is complicated. I hope I was able to explain it in a way that makes sense. We're going to see an example in a few minutes to help make this a little more clear. Um, the and the key is that this process continues to develop as a core part of board work. One of the things that is the biggest cultural adaptation for this is moving away from strategic planning being a large effort done by a task force that is brought together for the specific purpose of producing a plan for 5 years, and into being something that is either ongoing work of the board and the staff together or ongoing work of a standing committee of the board that the board recruits for this purpose, that is managing the dynamic rolling strategic planning process. In either case, because strategic plans are policy, they would need to be approved by the board, whether the board was the group primarily responsible for its development or had dedicated that to someone else. I talked through that one, so I'm going to move it a little bit. So here's the sample that I wanted to show you all. So in one of the things that we do when we do the bigger workshop for a congregation that's actually working to implement this, is we have a format that you can use that we use in the workshop to have you play with this idea of creating a 3-year strategic plan. It often is the basis from which a congregation then utilizes to actually create their real strategic plan, but it starts with naming what are some of the goals that you would need in that first year. What are the things that you're upcoming and what are the implementation steps that and who would be responsible for it in the detail needed for people to then take that and start doing it within the congregation. Year two, that next year out, it's not a completely new document. It is what are the next steps on those goals we're working on in year one that we'll take into year two, and then maybe a few more goals to go with it, with a little blank space. And then year three may be the space where if it's a continuing longer form project or goal, there may still be on there, but it could also be where you're beginning to dream about what is the next project beyond the ones we are implementing right now that we want to begin preparing for as a congregation. So if this is another question for the chat, if, as I just described it, imagine that what I said about those goals that you're dreaming about, the goals that are you want to begin working towards implementing. So imagine we were developing a 3-year rolling strategic plan from scratch right now. And what were the things for your congregation that you're not ready to implement yet, but you would love to be ready to implement in 3 years? What is something that you want to start putting the foundation under now that could allow you to do in 3 years from now as a congregation? And I would love you to, if you have something, put it in the chat. A plan for long-term building maintenance. Wonderful, Eric. Thank you. And I think, from the previous workshop, I'm a big fan of 20-year building maintenance plans. Getting the money together to have people assess your building could be why it's a third year goal, to be able to put that foundation together. Year one, maintenance survey. Year two, capital campaign, and fundraising. Year three, start implementing the plan. Thank you, Marion. You've actually got the beginnings of a 3-year rolling strategic plan right there. Now, the thing that you would do in developing that would be who's responsible for the maintenance survey? How do you get the money available to work with the contractors to do that, to do the survey work for that maintenance? Also, having a year two capital campaign, beginning to build a relationship with an outside organization that will help you to build that capital campaign, such as the Stewardship for Us, that the UUA partners with. Um, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so, but y'all will be able to see them. I don't have to read them as we go on. Linda says, we need and want to do more fun things in large groups in the congregation. Perhaps we will need to start to think about building or purchasing a new campus. Wow, that's a good third year goal because a lot of foundation would need to be put under that for that to begin to be possible. And sometimes in doing a 3-year rolling plan, you end up doing backwards planning. You name out what is that third year goal, and then your second year goal flows from um, starting to look at whether or not we do a financial feasibility study for whether purchasing a new campus is possible. And then a first year goal from that might be doing some congregational assessment about our current building and whether there's ways it could be adapted. So this model lends itself not only towards forward planning, but also backwards planning as well. Lori says the goals I'm thinking of are within 1 to 2 years, possible capital campaign, etc. We may need to sell our building, and that can't wait 3 years. There are times where the planning, I asked the question about your third year because I wanted people to get into dreaming space a little bit. But the reality is most of your planning work is going to be in most of the work around planning is always in those first 2 years. Because beyond 2 years, really circumstances may have changed in such a way that any planning beyond that, any detailed planning beyond that, is probably not worth the effort in most congregational circumstances. So thank you for naming me. Thank you all for engaging in that chat exercise. And if you've got more, feel free to share them. So I said this a little while ago, when one part of the system is, and probably the most important part, is the board making an intentional effort to assess each year as it comes to its conclusion, usually starting in the April, May, June timeframe, an intentional effort by the board or whoever the board is delegated, whether it's staff or a standing committee of the board, to do some real assessment about how well did we do. Part of that is celebration. Part of that is recognition of the places that maybe we haven't succeeded as much as we wanted to, so that could be rolled into our design of the new year two, or the new year one. But it's also so we can assess whether the situation has changed enough that planning we had done in all earnestness and with intent doesn't make sense anymore. One of the hardest things that we struggle with is letting go of planning when it's been overcome by events, when the circumstances have changed. And so part of the hard work of that assessment is saying, yes, that plan made perfect sense before our minister announced they were going to another congregation. And now our plan needs to change because the circumstances have changed, right? Your staff and lay leadership should be very involved at different levels. By lay leadership, I mean committee chairs and volunteers in providing input, but it doesn't call for the large congregational assessment processes that so often go with the 5-year rolling strategic planning processes. This is an example of how it continues to roll in each year. That, as you do that assessment, you redevelop that year one. And the key for year one is that it has a fully implementable plan attached to it. It is not just goals or ideas, it is assignments. It is where's the financial support for this coming from? Is the key to developing a new year one when a year changes, you take that 60%, which is your goal and some initial implementation. And between that April, May, June timeframe, you're making that something that starting on July 1st, the congregation can move forward with implementing. So a little bit about, I've talked about this a little bit through the workshop, but I want to highlight it. The role of the governing board is to be responsible for the process. Now, that is sometimes the board does this is a core part of the board's work, that the board takes on the role of being the primary strategic planners. And the reason for this is that it is often the board and the senior staff that have the deepest understanding of the congregation's mission, going back to some of our earlier workshops in the series. Um, uh, but there are times where the board that's not a thing that the board has the time, space, or energy for. And so there are some congregations that delegate this planning to staff, but there are also congregations that will delegate it to a group of lay leaders that is dedicated to this being their mission, this being their purpose. And one of the blessings of having like a standing committee or a dedicated group of leaders that are managing your planning process is that they don't have board tenure limits, right? You can have the same group of lay leaders who, and you all know, in congregations, there are people who love this stuff. There are people whose hearts are lit by doing the engagement work around doing planning for the congregation. And amen. So I do recommend that it be the board work because the board has the deepest understanding of the congregation's mission, but that's not always possible in every congregation. But in the case where it is delegated either to staff or to a group of lay leaders, the board maintains the responsibility for oversight and for approval of the planning process. And so would need to be in deep conversation either with the staff or the leaders about the development of that plan. It's not fully dedicated. It's not fully delegated. The board still maintains the responsibility because strategic planning is policy. The role of the staff is the staff are often going to be some of the primary implementers of whatever the strategic plan of the congregation is. And so the staff being deeply involved as information sources and in the planning processes and in the development. It's often the staff that can give you whether something is feasible or not. It can be a wonderful plan, but if the staff does not have the resources, the time, or the capacity to implement it, it's not a feasible plan. Um, uh, the staff are usually not the ones responsible for maintaining the process of planning. There are a few cases where that's not true, especially in congregations that practice stricter forms of policy governance. But for the most part, this is a lay responsibility, a responsibility of the board to manage that process. In congregation, lay leaders and members are often not those that are not directly involved in either the board or in a standing committee for planning are primary sources of information. So they are regularly engaged in the process of mission and vision for the congregation. But generally, in a dynamic or rolling planning process, there is not the big form congregational gatherings and surveys in the same way. There is an ongoing process of the board and the planning committee or the planning committee being in conversation with the congregation. But they are developing the plan not towards the congregation's wants or desires, but towards fulfilling the mission of the congregation as is understood by the board and the senior staff leadership. So in summary, um, in this system, in any rolling or ongoing plan, it becomes an ongoing part of the work of the board, either directly or through the lay or through a dedicated time. Should be combined with the work of the board or staff and deepen the congregation's understanding of mission and vision. And the key is to make it a central part of the work of the board. And planning should be adaptive and flexible for changing priorities. Next month, we'll be closing this year's series and talk about the congregational board's role in transformation, in bringing all of the things we've talked about this year together into asking the question, how can we transform? How can we be different? What do we need to do or become to fully live our mission in the world? And as always, we always highlight some of the additional board trainings. And with that, I am going to hand it to Matthew. Matthew?
Thank you, David, and thanks for all that information about the 3-year planning cycle. I can tell you that when I served a parish, I practiced something very much like this, and it works really well. I can testify to that. So we want to hear you begin to think about what that might be like for you. But first, let me start by saying who I am. I'm the Reverend Dr. Matthew Johnson. I'm one of your congregational life consultants working mostly with our pastoral size congregations between 100 and 200 folks. He, him pronouns. I'm wearing a black sweater, and I'm sitting here with some pictures behind me of pilgrimages that I've been on. I'm a middle-aged white man with glasses and a gray and brown beard, and based in Rockford, Illinois. We're going to head back into our breakout groups, where we're going to consider a couple of questions, which Chanel's going to put into the chat. First question, we might go around and ask, what kind of planning for the future does your congregation do now? So now that you have a sense of different models, what is the model that you're using now? And the second question would be, what is one part of your congregation's ministry and operations that could use some planning in order to live your mission well over the next 3 years? So, a plan is going to have lots of different sections about different areas of the ministry that you practice together. What's one area that you would really want to focus on, not to the exclusion of others, but to start there?
Welcome back, friends. Thank you for being here again tonight. Hope you had a good time in your breakout rooms. My name is Chelsea Krafka. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Mid-America Administrator. I am a light-skinned, middle-aged woman of mixed race with long brown hair and a collared shirt tonight, and a loud cat that is walking around beside me. I have a purple flower background on my screen. Um, as we come back from our breakout groups, I invite your primary contacts to share one takeaway that they have from your group discussion. And if you feel so moved, we also invite you now to share in the chat one learning that you are taking from our time together.
Linda and Margaret and I were a group of three. It was lovely to have the spacious time to talk. And a thing that we talked about, well, one thing that stood out for me is like how many similar patterns exist in the two congregations. And um, one of the things we talked about is planning for the capacity of the ministerial staff team and the variety of ways that congregations think about doing that when it's time to add a second minister. And another thing that came up that stood out for me was this idea that when you have a 3-year plan and the key staff and board are on the same page about what the focus is in the current year and coming up soon in the next year or two, that sort of becomes more commonly understood and known by the whole congregation. So people can kind of pull together in the same direction. So we're appreciating that. And I'd be happy to see what either of you might put into the chat about what you noticed different than I did. So that was just what stood out for me.
We had a quick, moving, robust discussion. Lots of areas were shared about volunteer engagement and building and finances and different pieces of planning and where folks are and where they're moving to. Lots of areas. And one common theme that came up and we noticed, and we thought we might actually ask you, David, give you a minute or two to um, uh, give a quick answer to a complicated question, which is a lot of the congregations in our group described a current process where committees and teams have a lot of authority to do the planning for their area. And so the board saying we're going to do planning based on our mission and we're going to do some alignment between areas, we're going to pace out where we focus on things. We get some pushback from some committees and teams who are used to being in charge of their areas. And so that it wasn't just a question of how to do the planning, but who's in the room and who holds the power over planning. So that was one thing that was a common thread. And we've got a minute here, David. I'm sure that's the
Yeah.
question that comes up all the time. Yeah.
It is, and this is, different congregations have different cultures around how authority rolls and how planning does. In congregations that have a really strong, empowered committee structure, where the planning is done at the committee structure level, the planning takes a little bit of a different flavor. The first one is that part of what the board is doing, or a delegated, subcommittee of the board, or standing committee of the board, is listening to those different committees, seeing what planning they are doing, and seeing how those get integrated together into a congregational plan. Some of that is going to those committees and saying, hey, maybe this isn't the year for you to begin this project, because this project from a different part of the congregation is going to impact that. So it's kind of serving as the deconfliction point between planning that is happening across the congregational system. But it's also, a lot of congregations have developed this pattern of committee led. Each committee is planning in their own individual silo, because the congregation has been led to, I'm not saying this to any particular congregation, I'm just speaking from my experience, has really been led, not had a deep mission focused in understanding and setting priorities for the congregation as a whole. It works best when the board is able to give clear guidance and clear priorities through a board-led planning process that then inspires the planning at the different committee levels, right? And oftentimes when committees are doing their own planning, it's because they haven't received that, is because they haven't been given the opportunity to be part of a cohesive congregational plan. So that would be my short answer to this. One, it is part bringing together what the committees are doing and deconflicting it into a congregational, but it's also setting priorities and missional goals from the board that then guides committee planning processes. Thank you for that, Matthew. That was fun.
Thank you, David. Yeah, a lot there, but I think that helps. And we had a great conversation. I think I'll turn it over to our Smalls, or maybe directly to Chelsea. Yeah.
Yeah, just back to me. Well, thank you all for attending this evening, and to David for centering us in the board's role and planning for the future. Art is a member of the UUA staff and was joining us as a guest today. Thanks for being here, Art. Good to see you. We will notify you by email when the recording is posted online in case you want to share it with other members of your board. We hope to see you all back next month on Wednesday, May 13th, at the same time as we explore the role of the board in creating and fostering transformation in a congregation. In addition to this monthly gathering, we invite you to check out other opportunities and programs on our website. Chanel is sharing a link to those in the chat. In particular, we want to draw your attention to the fact that the Mid-America region will now be offering programming at the Musa and Circe summer camps this year for the first time, the week of July 5th. And my friend Lauren will tell you a bit about a couple other opportunities.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I guess the other one that I wanted to lift up was the Congregational Leaders Conversation. It's a national offering, but it's Kiana Dene Perkins and I who co-host it every month. And it's been so fascinating this year. We've had such really thoughtful guests. And we just have two more gatherings, the one for April. You can see where to sign up in that link I just dropped there. We'll be focusing on innovative ministries that folks are doing in response to this moment that we're in. We're in particular inviting some representatives from a couple of congregations who are doing some really interesting and different things with their fellowship and worship and faith development programs that feel very cutting edge that they'll talk with us about. And then in May, we have some guests who are directors of music in UU congregations who we just had a planning meeting with them, and they are brilliant and have really inspiring things to share about how music can function in liberatory ways in congregations and communities. So that is a conversation you do not want to miss. We invite you
We
to
are
join.
playing with the name. I don't know if you saw this, Lauren. We're playing with the name. It's in the lyrics, music as a liberatory tool. To come learn about how music can help us be better people in our faith.
Nice, thank you. Our newsletter has great information. Chanel will paste a link to our website, and you can sign up for our newsletter towards the bottom of that webpage if you need to register for that. Lastly, I invite you to help us to get better at presenting this learning program by returning to the form that we offered earlier this evening and completing the remaining questions. And if you haven't yet started the form, you can find a link to it in the chat now. And we'll take just a couple minutes to get those completed and submitted. We are at the end of our time here, so I will get the alarm that says we're at the end of our time. That's convenient. Um, we are so incredibly grateful for your service to your congregations and our UU faith, and it is our honor to support your leadership. As we close, we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish our chalice flame and not the light of leadership that we bring to our shared living faith. We will carry and share that light until we are together again. Go in peace, dear ones. Thanks for being here.